Welcome to AI Snacks with Romy and Robbie, an AI literacy podcast. I'm your host, Anastassia, and this podcast, my blog on AI edutainment website, my Substack, LinkedIn, and the Instagram channel translate AI and robotics from difficult to easy to understand. Today, I am interviewing Gabriela Bar. She's a prominent legal expert specializing in technology and AI law. She's based in Poland, and she advises regulators and policymakers in Europe, including the European Commission. She's active in several international organizations dedicated to AI law and digital ethics. She wrote multiple books and papers on AI in Polish and in English languages. Examples are The Cheshire Cat or a few words about the concept of legal personality of AI. Another paper is The Impact of Law Tech on the Future of Lawyers. Today, Gabriela and I discussing concepts of AI ethics and challenges to deliver a comprehensive legislation in the field of AI. Of course, we talk about the European AI Act, and we address what happens in policymaking around AI in the United States. And we talk about AI progress in Poland. Poland is a true leader in AI innovation, with several cities such as Warsaw, Krakow, and Wrocław emerging as core centers for AI research and development. The Polish government has launched a $240 million national AI development strategy focused on the civilian and defense sectors. The R&D incentives are high, and the overall market projection last year was about $1.83 billion. So today you will hear from my discussion with Gabriela that there is not one single point of truth when it comes to smart and beneficial regulation of AI. Does European AI Act solve real problems? And what about economics of companies that need to comply with this piece of regulation? So it's time to open the studio to Gabriela. And in any case, please send me your questions, as the topic of regulation is a big one, while companies and countries are deploying more and more of AI and automation systems. Gabriela, thank you so much for joining my show, AI Snacks. And before we dive into the area of your expertise, which is AI and the law and AI ethics, could you briefly talk about how did you get into the field of AI, being a lawyer?
Thank you. Thank you, Anastassia, for having me here. It's a great pleasure to take part in your podcast. Well, I think it was quite a natural result of my previous activities, because from the beginning of my career as a lawyer, I was handling with new technology law. Of course, when I was starting, like more than 20 years ago, it was completely different. New technologies, it was probably emails and that kind of communication. But of course, technology develops very, very quickly. So here we are now with AI. And probably the other factor is that I'm really interested in technology. I've been always kind of involved in how the computer works and why it works like this. And I love science fiction literature. So I also read a lot about the future developing of AI and in technology in general. Maybe it's just science fiction now, but not necessarily it will be science fiction tomorrow, as it happened with generative AI, for example.
Well, this is so cool because, on this podcast, I have a series where myself and the professor for creative writing, science fiction and film, so we are discussing the portrayals of AI in movies and in books. And we're doing so because I truly believe that so the cultural portrayals of whatsoever influences how we perceive a thing, and whether we are kind of fearful what is going on. Of course, AI as a quite a big concept is something which might generate either excitement or angst, so
Yes.
fear in the general public. And you really need to deep dive into the underlying concepts of this technology, really understanding that this is nothing new. So it's coming from the 50s and 60s of the past century. So what is true, what is not true, what is being told, because there are some funds flowing into, let's say, one or another direction.
Yes.
And Of course, right now, I believe we have quite a misinformed dialogue, if there is a dialogue at all, with what is going on in AI. And frankly, I think we need to change this. But,
Yes, I
you
agree.
reside in Poland, and I am just very curious, what is going on in terms of AI in your country? So I'm aware that this is one of the most progressive countries when it comes to deployment of AI. So 62% of the companies in Poland in last year, in 2025, increased their AI investments, and 80% of the Polish companies have like full scale AI deployment, so full AI implementations. And just from the rate perspective, the percentage in the whole economy, this is far above other European countries. So, but maybe you can paint a landscape of AI and robotics in Poland and tell us in more details what is going on.
Thank you for this question. These numbers are quite impressive, and I think it's mainly because we Polish people, we are quite good entrepreneurs, I have to say. If I talk about Polish AI landscape, I have to say about two things that happen at the same time. On one side, companies really deploy AI very quickly in business, in e-commerce, finance, health, logistics. There are these areas where AI is really good developed already. But on the other side, there is a strong political probably and social push for technological sovereignty, especially for the Polish language, the Polish LLMs in general, and public sector use of these LLMs. So we have two major initiatives focused on Polish large language models, and they're really impressive. One is so-called PLUM, the Polish large language model. It's coordinated by public institutions and universities, and the main goal of this LLM, it will be, and it is, safely usage in administration and public services. And the other project, which is connected, of course, it's a Speaklash community, a community that builds open Polish language datasets, and they built also a chatbot, Bielik. It's a open Polish language model trained on local data. And together with Citizen Bielik, which involves society in improving the model, it's a very interesting project, and sometimes use Bielik instead of ChatGPT, for example, and it works very well, I have to say. We have also some governmental initiatives, for example, working group on artificial intelligence at the Ministry of Digital Affairs. I participate in their works in a section of AI, human rights and democracy. But let's maybe come back one more time to the private sector. So from my own experience as a attorney at law, as a person who advise companies in AI implementation, many Polish companies build AI for their own use based on their own data. And this is very interesting because they have a direct impact. I mean, this AI projects, these AI systems, they have direct impact on everyday operations in these companies. So they are not just PR demos, but they really work, and they are used in everyday work of these companies. Of course, we have some well-known companies also, like Even Labs, a global leader in generative voice AI. It has strong Polish roots. But I think that the very, very important thing is that even small companies or medium small companies, they really try to profit maybe to have profits from AI. It's not it maybe doesn't sound very well, but I mean that they make some usage from the data they have and the new technologies that appear. And I really like this approach, and because it's for me also very interesting job and very challenging job to do.
Well, that sounds actually really wonderful, because I would wish that this kind of, entrepreneurial zeitgeist, just, first try, and of course, pay attention to certain things, but try it out. This is something which can bring the society forward. And obviously, the more you try, the more you learn, and probably
Yeah.
the more you have people who are capable to talk about it, let's say, with more knowledge, instead of just, let's say, claim certain thing that they might have heard somewhere else. I'm curious, does Poland have a demographic problem per se? So do you face a declining in population?
Yes. Unfortunately, this is the problem which appears a few years ago already, and it's still growing as in probably many other European countries.
And does your government talk about automation, AI, robotics as, let's say, one segment of the economy, which kind of, can somehow mitigate the issue of the population decline? Is that kind of, conscious for the government, or is it something, let's say, they separated totally?
I'm afraid it's a little bit separated. Well, maybe I'm not the best person to ask me about politics. Well, yeah, I think that Polish government does a lot about some policies, frameworks, declarations, conferences, that kind of things. But this is all on the level of theory, I would say. And on the level, yes, let's do this or let's do that. But I have to say that I've never heard any interesting talk. I've never seen any interesting document about this relation you just mentioned between this lack of children and the fact that we are getting older and older and we don't have anybody to work for us, to be straightforward, and robotics, automation, AI. And as you mentioned, it is very important. But it's funny because yesterday I had a Spanish class with my teacher. I'm learning Spanish. I'm trying to, at least. And he asked me about some issues and about being old. So I told him, I really count on social robots when I'll be old, because I hope that this industry will be growing and it will help us, people who are, I don't know, in late 40s is now, that we have possibility to be taken care of such robots when we are old because of the changes in the structure of the society.
I can't agree more. And I'll just ask you spontaneously, because, this is one of the piece of my frustration. Because, we are all always complaining, oh, here and there we lack innovation, and innovation can't happen within silos. And actually, I would just assume that, let's say, politicians have access to tons of reports and research and data, and they can call on experts. And this is just a very simple thing of connecting the dots.
Yes.
So you have the demographical decline, and then you have a technology uphill, of course, I mean, with all the difficulties. So how do we bring somehow those two together? This is not rocket science, I would assume. And I'm talking about it because I've never seen a politician in the German-speaking countries doing it. So they discuss whatsoever, but not that. And at the same time, the level of education underlying the quality of education. So we are really concerned about the use of technology in the classroom and at the workspace. But how actually should we survive if we are not mitigating just the basics, the basic decline in the labor force, in the quality of education with the help of those technologies? So this is a mystery for me, but I'm not a politician. Probably because of this reason.
Because of that, exactly. Yeah, I agree.
Absolutely. But, this is, so you're talking about the Polish LLM. And by the way, I'm applauding. Not every country is dedicating efforts to do it. So I'm not saying do an LLM of a dialect.
Mhm.
So I don't want to go that far because frankly, why? But if you kind of, look into quite large linguistic domains of French, so they have obviously Mistral, so German, Japanese, Japan does not have an LLM, which is a mystery because, it's such a complex language and they use a lot of their national language when they work. So it's a mystery why they don't invest into building their national LLM. So Norwegians, they did it. I had Marianne Loken on my podcast, and she said when it started like 3 years ago, they struggled, but now it's working quite decently. So are you aware from the start to now, was there a period where people would say, oh, maybe it won't work, or was it kind of, a smooth development?
I think it was quite smooth development. We have a lot of successes on the international scene already with these Polish LLMs, and they work actually. They are used in practice too. They are introduced in stages, so it's not like now in let's say public administration we can use this plum model everywhere, but we can use it in some places, in some public administration applications, which is very useful, I have to say. And Bialik itself, the other Polish large language model, it's quite general. So as I said before, I can use it in my everyday work if I need to work with Polish documents and I need, more of have to be focused more on the Polish language. So it looks that we succeed already with these LLMs and that it will grow in the future.
Well, that sounds wonderful. Could you please now come to the core area of your expertise, which is responsible AI, ethical AI? Could you maybe start with defining what are the core ingredients of AI governance, responsible AI, and what does it mean in ethical AI?
Yeah, good question, because there's a lot of talking about responsible AI, governance, and AI ethics. And it's good. I'm glad that there's a lot of talking about it, but there are different meaning of that, and sometimes there are only slogans, I have to say. It's unfortunate. But yeah, if I think about responsible AI, I always start with people. So for me, responsible AI or ethical AI is not about technology alone, but it's about how the technology, AI in this case, affects real people in real situations. So when we start to think about designing or implementing, but the best it would be on the design stage of using AI system, we should ask a few simple questions. For example, who can be helped by this system? Who can be affected by this system? Who could be harmed by it also? Because it's always the risk. And exactly, another key idea is it's a risk. So if we say that the AI system should be, let's say, fair, transparent, robust, safety, secure, and provide some human oversight, it's all for all. I mean, not all ethics, not all rules for all systems. So some AI systems are low risk, like tools that help write text, for example. Others can affect important parts of humans' life: access to job, access to bank loans, credits, public services, hospitals. So the higher risk for people's right and freedom should trigger the stronger rules for ethical, responsible usage of AI, and should trigger also some means of control for this AI. So I would say that we need to adjust the level of responsibility to the level of the risk that AI systems provide. But for sure, accountability is essential. So AI systems do not act on their own. Yes, people design it, train it, buy it, use it. So it must be always clear who is responsible if something goes wrong. And to be accountable, we need to be transparent. So we don't, of course, need every user to understand how an algorithm works technically, but we have to understand what role the AI system plays in decisions, whether we can question or challenge the decision, the outcome of AI system. And so this is more about explainability, I would say, which strongly supports accountability and any other ethical rules for AI, also fairness. And finally, of course, data. AI system depends on data, and so the quality and origin of the data really matter, because poor choices at this stage, at the stage of choosing data for teaching, testing, validating AI systems, can lead to biases or unfair systems outcome later. So this is data governance is a very important part of responsible AI. So there are many aspects depending on what kind of AI system we use. But in general, I think this is never one-time action. This is always an ongoing process. Especially AI system can change if it's machine learning based system which can learn still after the deployment, for example?
I need to out myself. I critique the European AI law. So whenever I discuss things with so-called ethicists or with technologists claiming that LLMs of the sort of, let's say, ChatGPT and the cousins will bring us this general artificial intelligence, and at some point in time it's then results in super intelligence. So I'm always asking those people to show me the math, and I think we need to be quite cautious what we are dealing with. So there are some, let's say, flaws which are embedded into the design of any transformers and any deep learning systems. And those flaws are known since perceptron of Marvin Minsky, which is, 1969. So the layers, the hidden layers, the training in the artificial neural networks can't be fully transparent and declared because we simply deal with this multi-layered system. Even, I teach, for example, MBAs, what is inside of ChatGPT, but I can't explain at the length what is inside of each and every layer.
Exactly.
And this is something which is by design, and this is not solvable by regulation, because this is just the paradigm which AI took probably around 2009, 2010, and now, of course, we have a lot of innovation due to the availability of compute and big data. So when, of course, you move into hybrid architectures and you embed, let's say, ontologies into LLM, then you have much better explainability, but not everyone would do it for the sake of their own enterprise, because this is really costly and you must have superb coding skill, technology development skill, and understand where are those companies who might deliver this technology instead of, let's say, the holistic LLM-based chatbots. So I'm kind of questioning. So if we talk about explainability, deep learning systems can't be transparent by design. It is the architecture, so you need to change the architecture. At the same time, when we try to regulate what is not regulatable, if this is an English word at all, we end up with restrictions which prevent progress, development, and in my eyes, preventing this is unethical. So how do you view this? And just, to end these conversations, data, obviously, we deal with history. And if I start to operate on a green lawn, which I have to find, where is this green lawn, this kind of, ground zero, I might construct something, let's say, in compliance with everything. But if we deal with historical data, so they are historical based biases. So we can try to mitigate. And then we end up with the Black founding fathers in the United States, which was the case, as everyone knows, with Gemini in June of 23. So they really try to be more, let's say, diverse and open. And this is what they received as a result. So how do you think about this when you talk about transparency, explainability, biasing of systems, etc.?
Thank you for this question. It's a very interesting issue, and I want to make this thing very clear. Every time I advise to my clients, I'm trying to be as much reasonable as possible. So I'm not the person who just read rules or provisions of legal acts and say, okay, this is how it must be, because we interpret a legal acts and we have to take into consideration the reality. And in my opinion, legal acts, especially AA Act or any other acts, doesn't require full transparency or full explainability. This is not just requirement to be. This is requirement for something. And as I said before, this is not to show everything, to open the black box, to open the algorithm. Because I agree with you what you said about this in artificial neural network. Of course, and probably everybody who deals with that knows that this is not possible to explain everything what happens there. But why we want to explain things? Why? Why this is important? Because we need to be sure that there is no hidden biases that can impact the result of the algorithm work, let's say. So we want to be sure that if the algorithm decides about if I'm good candidate for the job, let's say, that the algorithm will take care into consideration all data, all my skills, qualifications, and not the fact that I'm a woman or not, or man, or I'm binary. So it's worth to have that kind of tools that can explain the decision, so the outcome, not in the meaning of opening everything, showing everything, including some IPR, some know-how, but this explanation must be the ground for people who are affected by the AI decisions for appealing from these decisions. So for saying, okay, I don't agree with this decision because I think that algorithm treated me in an unfair way. So I want to know what I can change in my behavior or in my situation to have different decision. So I'll be focusing more on that aspect. However, of course, there may be some other stakeholders like auditors that can check if the AI system works accordingly to some rules like ISO norms, for example. If the company declares that introduce ISO norms on AI, so the auditors have to have tools to check if it really works like this. So they may probably want to have a little bit different explainability than the person who was rejected at the company as a candidate for work. So we need to, from my perspective, and my opinion is that we always need to look at the problem for the perspective or specific scenario and specific goal that we want to achieve with explainability. And it's the same with fairness. Of course, I know, and it's obvious that algorithms, that AI models learn from historical data. And yet, this is the problem, that they want to be sometimes very fair, even if it's not justified, as the example you just gave us. So, and it's again, it's not the issue. The issue is that we don't want have algorithms that perpetuate old biases, old discrimination, for the future decisions that influence people. But if we want AI system, AI model, LLM to show us the history, to show us first president of United States, it's pointless to expect, and it's pointless to make it work like fair and showing first president of United States as a black person or something like this. So it's also very context dependent, and we always have to have in mind the goal of this rule, the goal of explanation, explainability, the goal of fairness, goal of other things, like also human oversight. Do we need human oversight everywhere? No, we don't. Because in, let's say, some kind of infrastructure where we apply AI to manage very complicated infrastructure, people can't make a quick enough decision to really manage this infrastructure. That's why we want full automation there. So human oversight will be only to, let's say, stop AI if there is something really wrong. So this kill switch or stop button, as we say. But we don't need human in the loop, human making decision or accepting AI decision on every stage.
You know, this is really interesting. I'm a very practical person because, I go into AI implementations and just, see what is possible and what is not possible. And listening to you, so I can really imagine a scenario where you move into litigation because something happened. But how many cases would we mitigate? And AI, so I truly believe it will be like electricity, it will be everywhere. So how much do you litigate? And I'm a former insurance underwriter. So, in underwriting risks, so yes, you use algorithms, and algorithm per se, it means that you emphasize certain things and you kind of, degrade other things.
Mhm.
This is how underwriting is happening. And current AI, it is a lot about search and retrieval. It is a lot about statistical representation. So there will be certain emphasis at the cost of other things, because those are the architectures, and the money is not moving into hybrids. It's not moving into let's inject real ontologies into the system. This is not how funding is currently done. And this is a huge point of what I critique, right? So the money is flowing into just, let's say, scaling what we have, with at all costs. And those costs are partly unbearable, the data center and everything. So what is going on right now? I'm just wondering, does this legislation, as it currently formulated, protect the consumer or a business, or does it create, let's say, a huge terrain for lawyers, for ethicists, for consultants to play with? And this is what I perceive, because for me, it's always, does it solve a problem? And the problem is not solved. I am all in if you say, look, you must document. For example, you're defining parameters. So you are starting building a model. You must document what you are emphasizing, what you are degrading. And this is, by the way, a nice business decision, because, if you are a brilliant AI builder, you will get 50% of parameters right from the beginning, only 50. And in the majority of cases, you're probably like 20% is correct from the first hypothesis, and you really need to iterate. And it's a costly process. And now we add more costs on the shoulders of those companies building AI, because they need to comply and they need to do X, Y, Z. Is it worth it?
Yeah, I understand your criticism, and I understand that compliance is never free, and sometimes it may look like a too big burden, especially for SMEs. But I also think that the AI Act is often described in a way that it's not fully accurate. So me, in general, I actually support the AI Act, and not only because this is work for me, as you said, because of course it is, but this is one set of rules across the whole EU, increases legal certainty, to be honest. So without common rules, we get 27 different approaches, and that usually creates more cost, not less, especially for companies operating across borders. And this is common when you deal with AI and some other new technologies. And the second thing is that AI Act is not just product regulation, because this is also a fundamental rights framework. So it puts the human being in the center, and it's very much in the line with the idea of trustworthy AI. So this responsible AI we're talking about before. And the third thing, I think, is the fact that the scope of AI Act is often misunderstood. Most AI systems in Europe, and maybe in the world, are not the main target of the AI Act. The strictest obligation are mainly for high-risk AI. So let's say 80 or maybe 90% of regulations in AI Act concerns high-risk AI. So only this AI that is deployed in very critical sectors like in biometrics, education, public services, democratic processes, justice, immigration in general. And we have only two other provisions. Like one is prohibited practices in Article 5, and one article is about, it's Article 50, it's about transparency obligations, especially when AI interacts with humans or generates synthetic content. So this includes clear duties around deepfakes, for example, which I think is generally important today in this information environment, let's say, which is very difficult. So, well, I don't know really the numbers, but I know the European Commission impact assessment, and they estimated that high-risk AI would likely represent between 5 and 15 AI applications. So it probably give an aggregate compliance cost about from 100 million euro to 500 million euro. But 2025. But of course, it was in impact assessment work, so it was some time ago at the beginning of the proceeding with the AA Act. So maybe it's not valid anymore. Mm, and from my perspective, AI Act is also very context dependent because it's risk dependent, and the costs for SMEs especially are not so high as it may looks from the beginning when we see all systems, all AI systems in the same way. So, well, they are pros and cons. I understand your criticism, but I also think that there are many arguments that support AI Act. And for me, the most important thing is that the AI Act is also about preventing very real harms for people, and it can help us people who may be affected by AI to feel safer in this more and more complex environment of AI.
I think that and obviously the act exists. Companies, individuals must comply. So this is for sure. I'm not kind of calling for don't comply. Don't misunderstand me. Just when so my calculations when I study it, they are very different from what you've just displayed. So one model to comply costs between 50 and 56,000 euro. I'm a startup. I don't have 56,000 euro per model. So there is this provision that it's not just touches the end products, but it's already kind of, when you're starting training. And this is a huge issue because, you must do so many iterations when you start building, unless, of course, you're building on top of something. And this is, let's say, an easy touch deployment. And to my knowledge, 36% of AI companies left Europe because of the European AI Act, because they could not swallow the costs. And I don't think that those people are, let's say, unethical and don't want something good to happen. I just think they try to kind of, avoid the burden of over-compliance and over-regulation, and they wanted to just try things out. And of course, the subject is tremendously difficult. I am not per se against regulation. But I would like regulation to solve problems. And for example, there is one issue in AI which gives me nightmares, and I'm really, and this is cybersecurity. Anthropic publishing papers, and I'm applauding Anthropic because they are open about what is happening, and they're describing how Claude is getting used by cyber criminals in attacking companies, successfully attacking companies. So obviously, guys tech, whether a criminal uses it or, let's say, us, the two ladies, it's the use of technology. And how can we kind of, strengthen the cyber laws in the European Union? This is for me something which is paramount. This is imperative for the economy to survive. This is where we must have more investments instead of trying to regulate something which is, let's say, due to the architecture, which is flawed, from the very beginning. And this might prevent investments into hybrid architectures, into other approaches. But I mean, once again, I'm not claiming I am right and everyone else is wrong. I'm just saying this is a very difficult topic. And whenever I discuss with people, with policymakers, I just lack knowledge of the basics in technology. So because, saying we are here for the good, this is not enough for me. And I think we must increase the dialogue with AI makers, not from the point of view, oh, you are not allowing us to do stuff, but this is how it works. Let's really define what type of problem would we like to solve. And I guess we won't solve the world freedom and the world fairness with any regulation. This is just, kind of, my take.
Yeah, probably it's difficult to solve these problems anyway, because also big technologies and AI, it's mainly in the hands of big companies, big techs. So it's also kind of a problem for having ethical and responsible and trustworthy AI in general. But well, I can. Yeah, well, it's hard for me to comment your results, these numbers you gave me, but maybe I will say something else instead. For me, the strength of EU approach is that it creates the coherent legal system. We have also legal acts concerning cyber resilience and cybersecurity. And they are also applying to the AI systems, of course. Yeah, this is again new regulation, and this is again maybe new burden, but it also depends on the way how we implement it, because we mainly have this NIS2 directive, and it has to be implemented in different member states in a way that may be less difficult for smaller and less critical companies. And the other thing I would like to say is, if we look outside EU, because you said that companies are leaving EU because of this regulation, but take the United States, let's say, we think that this is such a great, this is such a paradise for AI development, but there's no single federal AI law comparable
That's
to the
true.
AI Act, of course, but instead AI governance is spread across many different legal areas. And a key actor there is the Federal Trade Commission. And this commission can use general consumer and competition law. And firms are expected to understand their AI system to justify claims about AI performance, and also to explain outcomes where needed, not based on AI law, but based on, let's say, consumer and competition law. And important feature of the US system is also enforcement, because this Federal Trade Commission may use something like algorithmic disgorgement. So companies may be forced not only to delete unfully collected data, but also to destroy models trained on that data. So this, in my opinion, this shows that regulators can really seriously treat all AI harms, let's say, committed by the companies. And from a business perspective, kind of fragmentation doesn't make life easier. I think it creates more uncertainty. So there again, maybe more in, not maybe, there's much more investment in AI in United States, but there's no like paradise also for for AI companies. Maybe some companies are not aware of how much burdens they have there, because they are different in different states.
That's absolutely true. And just the philosophy of litigation and exercising the rule of law is very different, right? For everything, not just for AI. So, I mean, this is a tort law based system. So things will, let's say, burn, and then there will be a process and litigation, and then there will be, let's say, a ruling. And this ruling might then be a base for further rulings. And of course, I'm not saying we have a perfect system, but I would wish really, especially for the European Union, with all the problems we are having with really lack of sovereignty. And I think I really need to bring you back to this podcast. Because I'm seeing, for example, that China, who invested 150 billion in AI, and the same number into chipsets, right? Semiconductor technology.
Yeah,
So
right.
we are kind of, sandwiched between the United States and obviously the Chinese system. And obviously, even with all the issues with Trump and what is going on right now, still the policymakers are more leaning towards the United States systems in comparison to the Chinese systems. But I think we need to watch what will happen with small guys, because Chinese models are just less costly. And how will it play out once AI will be understood as a massive, massive factor of competitiveness? So for me, this is a huge mark. What will be the adoption of those Chinese models in the European Union? So there's no such a ruling that, let's say, they're forbidden. Yeah, but Gabriela, I can't thank you enough for those explanations and challenging my points of view, because I'm really learning tons, and I would really like to bring you back, because you worked a lot on a question of a digital persona.
Yes.
And, this is something where I guess so many people will be in agreement that we must really regulate this space. What does it mean to have a digital persona? Not everyone is Scarlett Johansson, who can protest loudly, and then her voice disappears from OpenAI, and there's no longer any need to say excuse me for using something similar, as the tale says. So there are some countries which on a national level put out regulations that the use of voice, face, etc. is forbidden, and it belongs to the other person. So we are in a very new territory here. I would love to bring you back and discuss exactly this very
Super
problem, because you are an expert. I am not. I'm really keen to learn from you here. And thank you once again for being my guest. All the best in your work, and congratulations on all your papers and everything you've done for the European AI ecosystem. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It was a pure pleasure to talk with you and also answering your challenging questions. It's a great discussion. Thank you very much. And I will gladly come again to talk to you.
It's a date. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much.
So, and for my audience, that was another AI snack with Gabriela and Anastassia. So Romy and Robbie are somewhere in the background. So the real Romy, which is my British short hair, and I use him as a chief marketing officer to actually market this very podcast. He's sleeping somewhere. So thank you so much for tuning in. And I think we learned tons about AI ethics, the European AI Act, its inspiration, and why it was created. And I mean, still we are just in the very early days of AI deployments across the world, including Europe. Goodbye for now, and I will see you next week.
Bye.
And this concluded another episode of AI Snacks. I'm very grateful for your time. And I'm definitely bringing Gabriela back on my podcast, as I want to discuss the concept of digital persona, deepfakes, and the evolution of law firms in the age of AI and generative AI. These days, I'm starting to release updates about two very important projects for this year. One is the creation of the second book of the Romy and Robbie series. Another is my work on the AI literacy project, which I am doing with the organization called Cybersecurity, and the results will be presented at Westminster in the House of Lords in London in October 2026. Stay tuned, send me whatever question you might have, and please support this podcast by buying a copy of Romy, Robbie, and the Secrets of Sleep on Amazon or on my book website. Goodbye for now, and I will see you next week with another episode.